So, as a quick recap, we've talked about how I grew up in a small town and it was a rural, poor town, and how I now look back at that part of my life and identify what happened and what qualities it gave me. And the way that I do that is through this map of consciousness developed by David R. Hawkins. And we briefly discussed one, what the levels are, my home life, my school life, how that made me who I am based on my early elementary school years. Then we went into my later elementary school years where I went from a school in the country to a school in the city. And then we talked about the 200 line, these archetypes here, and how you are the sum of the 5 people you hang out with. If you haven't watched those previous videos, you really should, because this one gets a little bit complex and we're going to build upon the concepts and the principles that we learned about in the previous videos. This video, we first are going to introduce some mathematical logs, and before your eyes glaze over, this is imperative for your understanding of what exactly we're talking about. So this is a simple introduction to logs. And what I've done here is we've got level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, level 6, so on, right? And what this represents is you can pretend, for this example, this is level 1, this is level 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all right? And the reason that we need to examine this a little bit further is because this level, this scale, these levels are on a base 10, which means every single point in one level is worth 10 points. And the second level, because it's a base 10 logarithm, is worth 100, and then it's worth 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, million, 10 million, 100 million. And so, what does this mean? What's an example I can give you? The difference between level 1 and level 2 is not adding 1 point. The difference between level 1 and level 2 is adding a 0 on the end of the level. And the same thing for each level. You add a 0, you add a 0, you add a 0, you add a 0. So this is multiplying and growing at rates that are much quicker and much more difficult the higher you go. To get from level 1 to level 2, it's only 90 points. To get to level 1,000 from 100, it's 900 points. To get to level 10,000 from 1,000, it's 9,000 points. And as you see, the difference, the delta between each of these is getting greater and greater. To go from level 7 to 8, you have to add 90 million points. And so let's go back to our real levels example here and demonstrate why it is so hard to get past this level and out of the survival paradigm. If you are an individual stuck down here, you have to add so much. You have to do so much work to get to level 21. And then you have to add another 0 to get to level 22. And another 0 to get to level 23. And so on and so on. There's each of these individual steps in between each of these levels. And if you put these levels on a chart, computer programs can't even quantify it. The chart goes up and up and up and up and up. And computer programs can't quantify it. They can't hold the numbers. It's why I had to use a more simple scale. And this is the best mathematical representation of all of these levels combined. But for the sake of these examples, we are going to go linear. But I will constantly flip the perspective to get the viewer to understand how important these levels are So that was the introduction to mathematical logs. This is not a linear growth. It is an exponential growth. Your bank account is going from $10 to $100 to $1,000. It is not going from $10 to $11 to $12. All right. So middle school, I had a few activities. They were categorized by football, lifting, soccer, gifted class, and hanging out at the roller rink after school. And we got to introduce a few archetypes here. And the first archetype we'll introduce is the system-trapped adult. They are constantly filled with apathy, grief, hopelessness, and they're only focusing on day-to-day survival and escaping via substances, constantly high on drugs. And they've got a deep mistrust of institutions. And when we apply our log mentality, our exponential mentality to this, we can see that even for them to get to 75, if they're averaging 50, even for them to get to 75 and have some emotions at 75, they've done so much work. They've added zeros on zeros on zeros on zeros on zeros just to get to 75. And that process is repeated time and time and time over, and that's why it's so hard to get past this survival paradigm. And the reason that these individuals are important is because, well, we'll go into that in the last video. I was getting ahead of myself. That is a high school conversation. So, survival mode peer here. We've already introduced this guy. These are the guys that I rode the bus with for the first time. And now I'm playing football with many of them, as we will talk about in a minute. The observer/secret striver, this is the archetype that I haven't introduced yet. The system-trapped adult was the first, and this is the second new archetype. This archetype is actually my archetype. I knew that I was going to escape the hometown. I was in the system, I was observing it, and I was using my structural advantages given to me by my parents, the no mortgage anxiety, and I was living beyond my means, beyond what my means should have been based on cash flow, to focus on my knowledge capital and planning my exit strategy. And I put this all the way down to 175, all the way up to 400. So I hover sometimes around that survival line. And there were days that I definitely dipped down here below it. And that is a story that will be told at the end of this video. I had the full potential to be up here in the 400s, reasoning with the best of them, like I was in gifted class over here. And gifted is still a large part of my life. And so this gifted class, what I've done here is I've got the archetypes. Friday Night Football Kid, Survival Mode Peer, Country Club Kid, the Heir, the Striver, which is me, and our advisor. And these are the number of people in the gifted class, right? And so there's 15 total people in class. And we've given, two survival mode guys, 2 Friday Night Lights guys, which we introduced in the previous videos, 5 Country Club Kids, 3 Heirs, 2 Strivers, and we've gone with their average levels here. And what we've done here is we've multiplied the number of people times the average level to get the total levels represented for each survival mode peer or each category of person. We've taken the sum of all of these and added them up, and we get a total levels, a total consciousness in the room of 3392 and a half. And we've divided 3392 and a half by 15, the total number of people, and we get an average consciousness per person of 226. So why does any of this matter? Well, in this environment, right, I'm the observer striver. If you're watching this video, you're probably one too, newsflash. In this environment, in gifted class, where there are a higher average level of consciousness, I am comfortably within this green zone here, meaning that I am trusting, I am satisfactory in my work. I am even getting up to the optimism, to the hopefulness, and I'm able to learn. I'm able to use reason and integrity to grow my mind and really build myself into something. And that's what I cannot stress enough. As someone trying to escape your hometown, you have to put yourself in environments educationally where you're learning and growing at a higher consciousness level and higher average consciousness level. And so let's briefly bring back the log example into this. Let's pretend that I was having a 200 day and I walk into gifted class and I'm having a 226 day because I'm in gifted class. That is like adding 26 zeros to the end of this 200 just because I walked in a different room, just because I was in a new classroom, just because I was being intellectually stimulated. This is a linear representation here. I can't possibly comprehend how many zeros this would be. But there were other days. There were days I'd been hanging out in football. There were days I was thinking about my parents' divorce. There were days I didn't have gifted class. There were days I didn't have the roller rink to go release. And I fell below this paradigm down into here. But before we get there, we're going to go into the football class and then loop back to number 5. So football and lifting. In this class, or in this, sport after school, lifting class, sport after school, there were a lot more survival mode peers. There were 20 of them. There were more Friday Night Local kids, 15 of them. We'll call it average 5 country club kids, 2 airs, but 5 coaches. And what we should recognize about the average levels here is that the coaches bring an exorbitant, a large amount of force to pull these survival mode kids up to an average consciousness of 174.5, which is truly incredible. They're taking these guys that are averaging 100 and they're adding 74.5 zeros to the end of their consciousness by coaching football, by these kids being in football. This is why it's so important that if you're ever locked in the survival mode, then you have to find yourself environments where you can increase your average consciousness level. And again, this is a linear representation, and it's also quite crude. We're going to add on to these concepts and expand upon them in the high school video and fully go in depth at how you, if you're a survival mode kid, if you're Friday Night Local, can ascend to even higher than this 174 average. As a young, impressionable middle schooler, especially focusing on days where I was thinking about my parents' divorce, there were days that I could have easily slipped down below into the survival paradigm. That is what number 5 is about. One day, I was sitting in class, it was 6th grade, and this kid, he's been chirping me, rage baiting me for the last few weeks, and I decide, okay, I'm going to stoop down to this level. This kid, I know he didn't have a good home life. I hope he's doing well now. But he was operating in this apathy, in this anger. And I, thinking about my parents' divorce, was able to stoop below my resting place of 175, my resting lower place. And we got into a shoving match. And that shoving match led to me having ISS for a week. This is how you can quickly, by being someone who's capable of all the levels, if you don't cut this level, this yellow, if you don't remove that from your environment and let it affect you, and if you don't actualize up here enough that you can understand all of these levels down here, then you will get got, just like I did. Luckily enough, it wasn't anything crazy, and it was in middle school. It wasn't on my permanent record for college applications, and I consider myself extremely lucky. So now we've concluded explaining how logs contribute to the levels environment, to the levels dynamic, and we've realized that to escape and to go from level 50 to just above survival is actually a very, very challenging feat. It truly is. And that to operate up here at these levels in the spiritual paradigm, you have to understand the consequences of every single level below it. And so to climb up level by level by level by level by zeros, by zeros, by zeros, by zeros, by zeros, by zeros, there's 380, 400 minus 20, 380 zeros at the end of a number between 20 and 400. And that is the challenge you are tasked with, understanding fully how all of these levels work if you come from a small, rural, poor community, so that you can interpret and understand your feelings as you go on and move throughout society. So next, in the next video, we're going to introduce high school. High school is going to be breathtaking, and we're going to introduce some new characters, and we'll come back to some of those strategies that I was really, really eager to introduce for these guys, the survival mode peers, and for these guys here, the strivers.